It's Tuesday, February 14th, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I am your co-host, one of your co-hosts, Chris Quinn. I'm joined by your other co-host, Mike Shalau. How are you, Mike?
I'm great, Chris. Great to be here.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Doing well. Doing better. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Sorry for your...
It's okay. We can move on. That's enough. I appreciate the sorrows, the condolences,
At least
I guess.
it's not Villanova, right?
True.
No.
Could be worse.
Could be worse.
So, but no, I'm doing well overall. I want to thank. We sometimes forget to do it. We got to remember to thank Lumpin' Radio for having us on again. WLPN 105.5 FM, Bridgeport, Chicago. If that's how you're listening, cool. Still listening to terrestrial radio, which is neat.
Good on you.
Most of you, I believe, are listening via podcast. Thanks to you also for listening. So, with that, thanks to the Fade Master. I think they can tell when he's here and when he's not here. They can definitely tell.
The show started smoothly.
Exactly.
We didn't laugh at each other in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah. So, I'm doing pretty good this Valentine's Day evening. Will you be my Valentine?
No.
Oh. Well, I was.
Yeah, of course I will, Chris. Come on.
Good. Thank you. Good. How are you doing?
Good. Nothing really new since last time. I think we said I got engaged last time.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you.
Hurrah.
So that's still new, I guess.
Yeah. And there's been, I think there's been some beer news we're going to have to get to in the next roundtable, but that's not for tonight. But
It's a teaser for you.
Yeah, there's been some juicy beer gossip that we can get into at some point. So,
yeah. Did you see any of the Super Bowl commercials about beers?
I saw one of them. I think I saw the Blue Moon one.
Is that the one where it was like it's a Coors ad, it's a Miller ad, it's a Blue Moon ad?
I wasn't paying attention to the ads very much.
Yeah. You didn't see the Boston Beer Company one then?
No, I heard about it after the fact.
Yeah,
how they're also
same.
going lighter, and how we had talked about at least that one's not changing.
Yeah. Well, they must have heard us and said, "Oh, those idiots think we're not changing. We should probably change it."
Right. Well, we are. We do look into the future.
Harbingers of doom, mostly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's a bummer. We can talk about that one in length in a future episode. But that's a bummer because I've had that beer recently, and it still tastes really good. I was never the biggest Fat Tire guy.
Yeah.
So I don't really care, but I do like Boston Lager. I thought it was really good, but if nobody's buying it, I guess switch it up.
Yeah.
Oh well. Then they can come back and do the original recipe,
right?
Like classic Coca-Cola.
It's all a big long gambit. To get back to the original recipe.
Right.
Spend millions and millions of dollars just to go back to the original recipe in 2 years.
So we'll talk about that, but not this episode because this one is going to be a special episode. It's going to be
something we've never done before.
Never done before, which is actually taste and talk about what we're tasting.
Yeah.
Right?
We drink beer every episode.
Yes,
we
drink
really
beer
talk about
pretty much every episode, unless one of us is like some fairly crippling degree of hungover or something like that.
Has that happened? I think even when you got in a car accident the day before, you still drank.
Day of, technically.
Day of, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know if there's ever been a time
I was in pain. I do remember that. I do remember being kind of out of it, and
I think you and I at least have like 100+ episode streak going.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe some guests have
101
been
now.
A little bit more responsible than us.
Sure. So yeah, it's true. I did do like a dry month, I think last year, not January. I did it in the middle of the summer because I'm an idiot.
Sure.
And I did have certain things carved out, and the podcast night was one where I was allowed to have 2 beers.
Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. You gotta drink on those days.
Yeah, those days. Well, those don't count.
Yeah, those are for work.
But of the days that do count,
yeah.
I still carved out the podcast.
Yeah.
So, yes, we're going to talk about beer. Why don't you set up what we're going to be talking about? Because we're not just going to be tasting beers and talking about them, specific beers. And we have a guest, too.
Oh, yeah, should we introduce the guest?
Yeah, maybe we should.
Okay.
Maybe we should. Why don't you introduce him?
You know him. You love him. Frequent guest. Everyone's favorite guest. Jerald, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for coming on.
First guest, I believe.
Yeah, first episode. We were on the first episode together.
Founding members.
You, me,
right.
and he who shall not be named on the podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, welcome back.
It's good to be back. I feel like it's once a year. I got to correct that this year by starting early, you know?
Yeah, right.
Early and often now.
Right. Well, yeah, when we were going to be doing a tasting episode, I think Mike was like, well, we should get Jerald for it. I was like, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're on the top of mind when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Superb.
So
yeah.
we're doing a tasting episode that hopefully combines kind of the organoleptic things we're experiencing while we're drinking some of our favorite
What
beers.
does organoleptic mean? You said it twice. You said it once before we went on, and I didn't say anything
sensory
because I don't
experiences.
know what it means. Okay.
Yeah, the way your organs experience things. I
Got
guess.
it. Okay.
And then also combine it with some of our more, I don't know, the reasons we like these beers beyond just that they taste real good.
And we specifically we all decided to pick beers that we think stood out in some way, even amongst their peers. So, like, if there's a Saison, it's not just going to be we're going to be tasting the Saison. We're going to be tasting it, and whoever picked it or brought it can say why they think this Saison is better than most other Saisons or whatever.
Top of their class.
Right, top of their class. Like, what makes it so good? So it's going to be exciting. We often talk about, what beers have you had that you've liked, or what beers are you looking forward to having? And this one, I am looking forward to having every single beer. So, yeah, I think we each have a couple beers picked out. If there's extra time, maybe we'll do a third. But then there's some letters I think we should get to as well before it gets too long in the tooth for them, especially when we ask people like, hey, we really want you to write in about it, and then they do, and then we get to it 2 months later. It kind of,
I have an
lessens
emergency.
the impact.
2 months later, we'll get to it.
Exactly.
How much of an emergency can it really be?
Yeah. So, should we get right to it?
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Jerald?
Yeah.
Or you?
I love the premise. I didn't even know that was what was going down as far as me being here, but I think your timing is prescient.
Well, will you tell us a little bit about what you do, your organization, what you do, and then more specifically how you do it for beer? And then Chris and I can be some morons that try to do it as well as we can.
Well, I dispute that highly, but I
Yeah, you're right. We will not try.
I will be glad to tell you what I do and how I try to do it. So at the Beverage Testing Institute was started in 1981 with the premise of trying to take a scientific approach to something that's ultimately subjective, right? Which is tasting and rating and ranking pleasurable things, namely beverages with alcohol. And in the course of that, we realized that we can only get as close as you can to being objective, but there's a lot of things you can do to like control for outside stimulus and other smells. I go to different tasting rooms and labs for breweries and wineries and distilleries, and you'll hear things and you'll smell things wafting through. So we try to control for all that. Get standard light.
Even the water. I think you spent a lot of time
on water.
On like what water are you going to have to, I guess, help cleanse your palate or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we moved from downtown, where we usually, I think, like Hinckley and Schmidt for years, and then we moved to Jefferson Park, where we're at now. And in the course of that, I'm like, we got to get some better water because that water is really inconsistent for our purposes. And we auditioned about a dozen different water purveyors, including one that was recommended to me by a wine distributor who's not around anymore. But he said they zap the hell out of this thing. They knew, they microwave it, they reverse osmosis, they put it in all sorts of UV filters, and they just annihilate anything that could be wrong with this. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. It sounds like, a bunch of hype, but it was by far the best water. It was also coincidentally a water that was not distributed in Chicago.
Oh, great.
Except at one location down the street from us, which is the Admiral Theater. It's the water at the Admiral Theater, which is a local, men's club. Gentlemen's club, I should say.
Yes, that's
awesome. And so
only
I was
the purest water for
only the finest water for the gentlemen's club, the gentlemen in the club. And so I was able to convince them, because they had to do a run down to the Admiral Theater, that they could stop and drop a few 5-gallon containers for us. And we did that for years, and it was great until the company got sold. And we noticed that we were getting like a cork taint kind of flavor from the water. And we're like, what the hell's going on? So it was like digging into what was happening in the processes. Was it our machine? No. Was it we're doing different samples of the water? I'm like, yeah, no, it's definitely in the water. But then I was looking at the enclosure for the top of the 5-gallon container, and it has a piece of foam rubber. Pulled it out and smelled it, and it was right there. So somehow they had TCA that had infected their vinyl or the production plant that made these things, and it was leaching into the water. And our panelists were, we're kind of focused on flavor, right? And we're like looking to water to kind of cleanse our palate between products that we're tasting, and we're getting TCA, which was like a killer. Like, it lingers forever. It just takes a few parts per billion to really ruin any kind of sensory experience for a beverage. And it was nearing that threshold of it, and we're like, crap. So I was like, okay, enough with the vendors. I use a system at home called Multi-Pure, and we basically installed a bunch of purifiers, and just are purifying and double purifying all the water in the office, and actually saving quite a bit of money that way. So it was like, okay, project done.
So you guys take this seriously.
Right.
We take it seriously. So, further answer your question, we taste everything blind, which we're not going to do today, obviously.
We also haven't cut off all the noise or any of the smells.
We haven't done any of that good stuff. I think we shut the door. That helped. And the lighting's a little, we'll see. We'll see if we can.
It's comfortable.
It's more of a vibes tasting.
Yes.
Yeah.
This isn't supposed to be a, I think it's supposed to be more replicate a real world drinking experience of these beers.
IRL for certain.
Yeah.
I think we're following one of the principles, which is one that's violated almost every competition of any kind of beverage, was just tasting too many products. Wow. So I know we're somewhere under 20 here, which is ideal. We don't taste more than 25 products a day, and that's really key, because you just burn out. You literally can't distinguish things, and certainly not describe them with any accuracy or subtlety. I think what we're doing here is pretty valid. I mean, we got pretty clean glasses. We use Riedel stemware that's more like conical and kind of focuses things.
Now, I will say, now that I think about it, I didn't rinse all of these, but
these aren't beer clean.
I think they're beer clean, but I didn't put them under the rinser. Is what I mean, the little spray rinser.
Sure.
Yeah, sometimes I do, but I forgot
live,
to. I think we'll live.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not even the beer temple drinking experience, but it'll be good enough for podcasting.
And so when you do have those ideal situations, what do you then? How are you assessing a beer?
Well, so things are flighted up according to some rules that we've sort of developed for flighting all sorts of products, and it's pretty basic. You go from lightest to darkest, heaviest, alcohol beers at the end, lighter alcohol beers in the beginning. We taste lagers with the lagers with that kind of progression, then the ales with the ales and that kind of progression. And in small flights, like 3 to 5 products in a flight. The point is not to compare like, oh, this one's better than that one, but to take each one, at least in our methodology, and say, is this, how does this compare to my experience of the best example of, let's say, Vienna lager, if we're tasting Vienna lagers, and really compare it monadically, another $10 word from the sensory sciences, which means basically on its own as opposed to within the group. So we're not trying to knock down the rest and say, this is the best and let's make it a gold medal. We're saying, how does this thing compare to the best examples of my experience and everyone on the panel's experience? And that's the other thing. It's a panel. It's a group activity.
Are there specific beers in each category like that you guys say this is the standard and people can go and taste? Or is it just like individuals, like mind's eye version of?
It's the mind's eye, because we tried all sorts of different ways of doing warm-up exercises with the different benchmarks, but really it's relying on people that have a lot of experience, and generally these are people in the trade that, like the Chris, for instance, that's a buyer that's being presented with all these beers on both ends, right? From people trying to sell him beers to him trying to sell beers to consumers. So he's really at the pointy end of like knowing these categories and what's good and what's not good, what people are resonating with. So we really rely on people in the trade with that kind of experience to have those benchmarks already set. And we'll tell people what we're tasting, what the categories are, and to make sure that they have those, ready at hand. And then that's really the exercise of, okay, now I've compared this, now I'm going to put it on a scale of how close it gets basically to that paradigm, and then describe it. And then the description part is sort of like the mental yoga. It's like taking, ideas and impressions of flavor and converting them to words. And so that kind of exercise is a lifelong sort of art that people,
Very difficult.
People really kind of come to us to learn how to do.
Yeah. Cool.
It's mentally taxing to do. I think that's another reason you probably couldn't do more than 20 or 25 or whatever. It wears you out to sit and think, like, what's a word for this flavor is just not something that comes normally.
Right. And you develop all these pathways of like, it smells like this thing that I remember from this time in my life.
Right.
But that really isn't that. It's actually probably this compound. You end up doing all these sorts of workarounds, at least in my experience of trying to like develop a language with people we're tasting with of like, that really isn't tennis ball. It's more this thing. But like I played tennis and then we would eat Pop-Tarts.
It's the combination of the two.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the fun of it. I mean, we try to get people into a zone where they can feel free to express their thoughts and their impressions, and really anything's valid. Once you get to that point that you can really identify it, you start to put it into words, you listen to what other people do in terms of putting that, and we're all talking about the same beer, right? So we'll taste, let's say, the flight of the 4 Vienna lagers, and then we'll put in scores and things in the computer, but then we'll go round robin and talk about it. So you hear everyone's words, right, and their descriptors, and then things like make sense. You start connecting dots for yourself. Those pathways become hardened, and then you start to say, oh, okay, that's what that is. And then you start to riff on that and build on that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Are we ready to get going?
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's go.
I'm going to ask if we take just a very quick break, and then we'll get our first one going. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back with the Beer Temple podcast. We've got to figure out who is going to go first. Is there anyone who wants to throw their hat in the ring?
I'll throw it in.
All right.
I brought quite a few things. I wasn't sure.
So if
Quite
you were,
I wanted to
yeah,
do.
start. If we're, let's assume you'll get to 2, maybe 3. So,
2? Okay, great. So
pick one.
well, and in the premise too was like kind of what am I drinking now and what I'm grooving on. So, I'm in a Pilsner mode pretty much all the time these days, and for a go-to thing. And then we're in winter in Chicago. It's cold and rainy out here, so I want something a little more substantial. So I brought a range of things, but I think we'll start with the Pilsner.
Okay,
We're
then.
going to go with one-time guest, Mr. Microphone.
Yes.
And in this case, it is his Italian Pilsner, the Hey Mambo Italiano, which we reviewed
Thank you.
recently at BTI, and it did very well. And good thing about BTI is that they always send a 6-pack or so then the leftovers
Right.
I get to really analyze at home too, and
funny.
I've been enjoying this.
No, we have the original Italian Pilsner on draft right now too. Tipo Pils.
Oh, Tipo. Oh, I got to try that after the
yeah.
show. Cool.
Yeah, the one that kind
and
of
bottles too, right?
Yeah, and we have it in bottles too.
Yeah.
So the one that kind of started the whole thing, which is kind of cool. There's certain styles that you can draw back to a singular beer, and I think that's one of them.
Yeah.
Pivo and Tipo maybe as a duel, but really Tipo.
Tipo was first and an
Yeah.
admitted
Yeah.
inspiration for Pivo.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
So, well,
cool. Well, cheers.
salute, enchanté. Cheers.
All right. So,
Process?
yeah.
yeah.
So observation first, it's slightly hazy. It's
Mm-hmm.
got good head retention. Swirl brings it up even more. Good little bubbles. I also listen to it. I don't want to hear a lot of cackling and a lot of high treble. That usually is a sign of an infection.
Okay.
Can you hear
And then
that?
on the nose, yeah, it's quiet. It's so quiet for an Italian beer. And which, that's great. Nosing wise, yeah. I mean, we're getting
Yeah. So,
what we get. So we'll talk about what we
yeah.
get.
So, I mean, I think the thing for me with Italian Pilsners is they are essentially, well, as Matt Brynolfson the inventor of Pivo Pils,
our new best friend,
was saying, it's really like a German Pilsner that's dry hopped with like noble continental hops, right? But I think it goes even a little bit beyond that. It's almost maybe like a North German Pils, so they tend to be, I think, pretty dry, a little bit more bitter.
Like Jever?
Yeah, like Jever, exactly. Yeah. But with a big kind of aromatic character to it, which, I can see why it would be popular in the U.S.
Yeah.
I'm getting a ton of like grassy, herbally.
That classic
notes to it.
noble,
Yes.
spicy thing.
Yeah.
Also, almost like a hint of like the Belgian yeast kind of fruitiness too.
Sure.
You know, just a hint of it, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and as soon as it hits your lips, it's hop dominant. I mean, that's like the first thing I noticed when it hit my lips. It's a pretty dry example, I think, of a well, like I don't know if dry is it seems to me to be
I think it's pretty dry.
hops. Yeah, no, I think it is, but that's not necessarily the word I was trying to go for. It's I feel like it is hops from beginning to end. So
Yep.
the aroma, as soon as I get it, it's those noble hops, and then I swallow it, and like pretty much from the mid palate all the way through, it's like hop flavor right into bitterness. So to me, it's like just riding the hops the entire time. For me, I don't know. What do you get from it, Jerald?
I would agree with that. I think it's notably astringent, you know, so I agree the hops are serving, you know, a flavoring role as well as astringency, so they're quite versatile in that sense. And the malt's in the back seat, but it's clearly there.
Yeah.
And it's coming out more in the finish, I think, more than in the mid palate, which is interesting how they arc that.
Yeah, like way at the end, maybe you get a little bit of that kind of like a breadiness. I think like a white bread, just a little bit of like a white baked bread.
There's like a hop fruitiness that comes in mid palate too. That it's mostly a spike mid palate. Like the finish isn't particularly fruity, but the middle is this kind of fruity thing to me.
Yeah.
More than the aroma or the finish.
Right. And what about this beer? Like kind of stands out amongst other pilsners for you, or other Italian pilsners if you're tasting a whole bunch of Italian pils.
So my house Pilsner is Pilsner Urquell. So I mean, I buy that a lot. And I like that this one, you know, we taste a lot of American style Pilsners that are more overtly fruity and can really get into an ale kind of territory, which can be fun. But like for a go-to everyday beer, I want something that's closer to the Pilsner Urquell kind of experience. But I wanted something, you know, after being exposed to this one, like that has a little bit of that fruit on the mid palate, and has the proper astringency that I would expect from like a northern, you know, like a Jever or something like this. I like that style a lot. I cook a lot, so I wind up having this kind of style, not so much for crushing on its own, but like it's great with food.
Yeah.
You know, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think really good expression of those noble hops. There is a little bit of fruit character. Like when you, similar like that off mic that we were talking about, like when you really focus on colors, you can see a lot of different hues. There's this guy, Eric Toft, who's a brewer at Schönraum in Germany. When you hear him talk about noble hops, it's like, right, yeah, pina colada, sure. But then you taste, like, I'm sure he's tasting like pineapple and a little bit of coconut in tradition. So, like, really good noble hops also have layers that beyond just like it's spicy, you know, or it's hoppy, and so like the best versions of this bring that out in some way, I think.
Yeah, and to me the best pilsners are ones that you can drink pretty effortlessly.
Yeah.
And this certainly is there. If anything in a pils, I like when they're a little bit almost not too bitter, but really could use something maybe a little bit fatty or a little sweet to really kind of bring it out. And if anything, I would say this is what kind of is going on with this beer.
Yeah,
so
I like that. Personally like that, like nearly astringent drying character. Not necessarily
Yeah.
from bitterness, but that combination of dryness and a nice bitterness and hop character that really dries and quenches and makes you want to
Yeah.
make more or eat something with it.
And hey, I mean, give credit to the Microphone, who's known for, candy stouts and stuff
Yeah.
like that, for putting together a light,
There,
a light pilsner.
There's a lot of breweries that make this style, and then it ends up with like mosaic or something in it that you're like, that's not really the thing. It's
Right.
not like it's not a cold IPA. It's a different thing than that. And this one, for me, falls right into that Italian style pils with the
Nice.
hop character that you want.
I think another thing too for me is the minerality. When I think of European beer that separates it from American,
I
I was
totally
getting the
agree.
minerality of the wet stone kind of thing I
Yep.
can get from this.
That's
thing.
what I love
It's
about
like-
Trumer.
Yeah.
I mean, it has that same minerality to it, that I almost start to like crave it when I'm drinking, like when a beer that doesn't have it. It's like I want that minerality to it, which is great. And you're right, it does have it here too, which is cool. I guess that's just water profiling that they're doing. I would assume.
Probably.
Cool. All right. Anything else we want to do? We're going to move on. Maybe we'll get more than 2 in.
Probably get more than 2 in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
May I go?
Yeah, absolutely.
So mine's going to come as a surprise. So there was there was a couple that I figured people was going to assume I would do. I mean, I really wanted to do Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, but I didn't. I figured if we ever do it again,
Still got time.
we do still have time. And one of the beers, I will say, that I was planning on doing, I'm not able to do now. Which is why I took a break earlier, because I realized I can't do the beer that I wanted to. But this beer I certainly can. And this is the award-winning, per the can, Headhunter India Pale Ale from Fatheads. This was canned 12/22, so pretty fresh, less than 2 months. It's been in my fridge, so it isn't going to be a screamer of how fresh it is. But, yeah, I mean, over time, let me just clear out my little glass here. I have come to say that this is my favorite IPA. So we can talk about why that is. Yeah.
That's a big statement.
Yeah, it is. I mean, especially with this kind of a this kind of a
Category.
It's huge. It's a huge category. So, look at
Killer.
Surge.
Killer.
I mean, gee, Surge, why don't you just pour yourself a whole glass? Why don't you?
Mr. Completist over
Yeah.
there.
Okay. Well, we can tell Surge also likes this beer. So, anyway,
And it's gone. He drank it already.
yeah. Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. All right. So why do I like this beer so much? I mean, to me, it starts with the aroma.
It's fabulous.
It jumps out of the glass, which is really nice. It's got what are you guys getting as far as the I mean, all obviously like Pacific Northwest.
So I've realized recently I have a tough time now describing the actual aromas rather than going to hop varietals that I think it is.
Oh,
I
okay.
immediately try to go to, this is like some sort of citrus Simcoe thing, or like I bypass the actual fruits and things now, but I'll do my best. So,
Okay.
someone else go.
So I'm getting
while I
go
unpack
for
my-
it. What are you getting?
I
Joe?
get like a pineapple herb relish.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm going with that. Little
Definitely
mango,
pineapple.
mango salsa kind of thing.
Yeah, it's doing that tropical and citrus rind thing at the same time.
Yeah.
With some there's a little pine and a little bit of that diesel, like a little diesel dank going on in the background.
Diesel dank. That's interesting.
You don't get that?
I think I know I think I'm smelling what you're talking about. I wouldn't have called it that, but I think I know what you're talking
really,
about.
well, I drive a diesel car, so I'm very,
Oh,
familiar
you know
with
the
got
diesel
it.
dank?
I know the diesel. The
diesel dank.
Yeah.
Many shades of diesel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, has a bit of that maybe chivy quality to
Yes.
it as well.
I know this is impossible, but because of this aroma profile, it smells like it's gonna be like I can smell the way the body's gonna taste. Like it smells like it's gonna be this West Coast dry thing. And I've had this
Right.
beer, so obviously I'm leaving
Right.
myself.
So it's gonna
But
be
just
like-
that profile. I think that addition of that little oniony, diesely
Right.
thing.
And you're going to be
To
this
me-
like this super light crackery,
Yeah.
bitter beer, and then you taste it, and it isn't quite that.
Right.
I would still say it's a West Coast IPA, maybe a Midwest IPA, if that's, we
Sure.
can call that a thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of a two-hearted lane. It's
Right.
walking,
Yes.
Right.
Right. Because it has a little bit of, and that's what I think I've learned is key to this beer is that little bit of malty sweetness, like
Yeah.
right in the middle, that kind of cuts through and really amplifies some of those fruity flavors. Because like all those things that we were talking about, so many of them we associate with sweet things like mango and pineapple and stuff like that. And that sweetness, I think, really kind of scratches the itch for me.
And the sweetness with the bitterness
Yeah.
is really nice.
Yep, and it's strong too. I do think that helps. The fact that it's like 7.5 or something. It's pretty strong.
It's pretty fat.
Yeah, it is.
Well, we did have a conversation a while ago that like for some reason, and neither of us drink a lot of beers that are much over 5%, except for IPAs. The magical range is like 7 to 7.5 for some reason. It just hits so much
7.5.
differently.
Yeah, that's what it is. 7.5. So 80 IBU. So man, it's bitter. Wow, this is an 80 IBU beer. That does surprise me.
It doesn't present like that.
No, I think it's because of the sweetness.
The sweetness.
I think sweetness and then that alcohol, which also adds perceived sweetness, is propping up that bitterness. Like Ninja
Yeah.
versus Unicorn is a 80 plus IBU beer as well.
Okay, yeah. How
And
strong
drinks
is that? Like 8?
Yeah, drinks really similar to this. That's just my most consumed reference point
Yeah.
for stuff like this over the years. But like that's also like at one point that was like 120 IBU beer when it was like in the 10% range when it was in Bombers. It came down a little bit as it should have, but yeah, when you have that a little bit of sweetness, and that's a pretty dry beer. That's like a drier than this, but a little bit of sweetness and that alcohol that adds a little perceived sweetness, you can balance out that higher bitterness.
So what to me makes this beer better than other IPAs? I just think it's like how the subtlety in how all the parts are there in the exact balanced amounts that I personally like them.
Right.
It's just it isn't bone dry, which I would have thought I liked bone dry IPAs, but I actually don't. I like them with a little bit of sweetness to them. There is a little bit of like, I don't know if it's literally caramel malt, but there's like a little bit of color to it as well, and it just really enhances it. I think the types of hops, the way that the hops present, and just how darn drinkable it is. Because for a 7.5 beer, I can crush these beers. I can easily put down 2 of them, and sure, just shaking his head too. Yeah, I mean, it's you can just drink it. I mean, even to me, more than something like a Maine Lunch, which is another like 7.5% IPA, one of the best. It's a little lighter. It's not as drinkable for me as the Headhunter is.
I've had that beer really recently, and I think it's a little drier, and I think it's a little like it presents as a little more bitter than this.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is actually more bitter than this, but the drinking
Right.
experience definitely it's not as crushable as this.
Yeah. So I like it. Just kind of fills my mouth with those hoppy flavors that I want from an IPA, and it just enough sweetness to kind of stave off the 80 IBU. It has bitterness to it, which also is important because you want that bitterness at the end, so it doesn't like finish flabby,
Right.
and you just want to drink more. If you've got a little bit of a bitter flavor in your mouth, I mean, I think it just aids the drinkability of a beer.
Right. And I think for a style of beer that American craft beer as a whole has explored every angle of how to present this, like the hoppy flavors, right? There's like really sweet versions. There's really dry versions. There's really bitter versions. There's barely bitter at all versions. Like finding this then becomes a lot of personal preference too, of like on that matrix of all those flavors, this is exactly where I want this. And I think I agree with you. This is one of my favorite IPAs as well.
Yeah.
But probably because I'm friends with you.
Yeah, and when you have somebody who's like talking it up all the time, and it does deliver. I mean, it's a great IPA.
Yeah.
And it's also fun. It's also funny that it's just so goofy. It's like the branding's so terrible.
I hope they listen to this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I think they know it's goofy. I mean, so terrible. I mean, that might be a little harsh, but
Well,
you know,
it's got that like New Glarus level charm of like, yeah, we had our nephew do it in Photoshop, and then we lost the file, so we have to keep printing the same one.
right?
Exactly. It's like that vibe.
Right. So I think it's an Ohio thing. It must be an Ohio brewery thing.
With Hop and Frog.
With them and Hop and Frog, or maybe like they're from Akron. I was going to say maybe a Cleveland area thing, but maybe it's a Northern Ohio thing. I don't know. Yeah. Have you ever had this beer before, Jerald?
First time.
Okay.
I'm
cool.
enjoying it. Yeah.
What do you think? You dig it, or
I totally dig it, and I'm listening to your descriptors, and I think I agree with all of that. I think the only thing I would add to the conversation is I do get like the herbal kind of oregano, kind of bordering on Mary Jane, popping its head through there too, which I think is another layer that appeals to me in the final mix of this thing. But I like this style quite a bit.
Yeah. I think that's what maybe you were alluding to when you said kind of that dankness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that kind of like, that weed. Yeah, there you go.
It's hanging out in the periphery of this.
Yeah,
thing.
no, but it's
in
definitely there.
Yeah, but just like the beers, it's like just enough of that, just enough of the tropical thing, just enough of the little grapefruit thing, just enough pine, just enough sweetness.
Yeah.
It's the balance that's attractive to it, and it's very beautiful because of that.
And I also like that it's old enough to not have all the insanely fruity tropical hops in it, I mean, there might be Citra, there might be Mosaic and stuff in it, but I don't think it's going to have anything more exotic.
Right.
than that.
There's no Sabro in this.
Right. Yeah.
There's no
Nelson Sauvin.
southern hemisphere hops in this. There's good old PNWs,
Yep. Which is, hey, we're Americans, and I like RB. I like our IPAs.
America first, baby.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Yeah. What do you got?
I brought
An American beer.
my first round. Yeah.
Oh.
My first round draft pick of like every draft we do. Terrace Bulba.
Cool.
I think that we also discovered this is a little long in the tooth, maybe, but
Is it?
this is one of those beers that is excellent fresh, but also okay aged.
How old is it?
A little under a year.
Oh, is it really? It's that old?
Yeah.
Fully mature.
Yeah. Sorry. And this is one of my favorite, just like as someone who makes Saison and loves a little bit of yeast character to go with my hops and my dry beers.
Can I see the other bottle?
This one.
Or that one's fine too.
And the other one for
Is it-
Surge. This, especially when fresh, is like the ideal combination of fermentation character, pronounced hoppiness, and just drinkable combinations of that. Sorry, I'm still pouring them. There you go, Serge.
Man, even with that, it's got it still has a hoppy character to it.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think also part of that is like it's not only relying on dry hops for its hoppiness. Like there is significant kettle additions and embedded hop character in this.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get that a little bit of that estery yeast character. Definitely some noble hop things going on,
sure.
some citrusy things going on.
So dry. Boy. And it's got quite a bite to it as well.
Yeah. But this one, unlike some of the others, and maybe it's a little bit of the age, the malt comes in a little bit at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
In a way that like the obviously different style, but the microphone beer was just hops for the whole time, and then a little malt underneath it. This one goes a little bit more of a journey, where a little bit more malt character up front, and then the hops come in mid, and then really take over, and the bitterness kind of eases you into that finish, I think.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree.
But yeah, still like a pretty present, noble hop character, even at almost a year old, or maybe even a year old.
Yeah. But I what I like about this beer is, I mean, you're asking, why does this beer, like, how does it compare to its peers? And this is one of the few beers that I know of that I don't know if it has a peer.
Right.
There's like no other beer like this
Right,
that I
and
can
it-
think of,
it's
which
one
is
of
surprising.
It's one of those beers that like every brewer that's aware of it loves it, you know? And so the fact that no one really makes anything that is anything actually that where you're drinking, you're like, oh, that's kind of like Terrace Boba. Like I've never thought that of like anyone's beers. I don't even know if anyone's attempting to, because most people are just like, he's got those weird spaceship tanks, and I don't know how to do that. But yeah, also just like the romance of the story and of De La Seine and him writing the Cezanne book and I don't know, all that stuff, and this being the liquid manifestation of someone who's thought and meditated a lot on what these types of beers should taste like, whether or not that's what they did taste like back in the day, to some people disagreeing, but
I'll tell you,
I'm happy
I mean,
with this. About this.
even this beer at this age, it is, I think, noticeably the most bitter beer of the three that we've had. I mean, I don't know if it's literally higher IBU, but it finishes much more bitter than I think the other two. I mean,
I
just
thought the
sitting
Headhunter
here,
was more bitter for me.
really, like
think
for this
so.
one now,
I think
I'm
so.
just sitting here and I haven't had a sip in maybe a minute, and my mouth is completely bitter. Where with the Headhunter, it didn't finish that way. So
Sure.
it's just got this, and that it has, and minerality. I've got this like strong minerality, and really, really clean, firm bitterness.
Yeah. Structure of it. Like I know that's a word that kind of can be amorphous and kind of counterintuitively. It's kind of hard to pin down in beers, but like it is a structured beer. I think that adds to all of those things. Right?
Yeah.
I think the hoppiness creates that bitterness, and almost to the point of astringency
Yeah.
creates that structure and that almost tannic like experience of some wines that have that really tall, tight structure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the bitterness is still just hanging out, because I'm waiting. I'm just waiting to see, and it's yeah.
And that's like one of those things of when people are like, "Oh, it has a long finish." When people aren't always talking shit on that. Sorry, sir, aren't making that up. It's like that's a thing. Like sit and wait until that doesn't. Your mouth isn't experiencing that thing you just drank.
Yeah.
It's a long.
I mean, it's still there. It's finally now trailing off for me.
Yeah.
But it's yeah. I mean, it makes it. This is a beer that I've had, a night of just drinking this beer and just like going after it. Because the other thing is, it's really low alcohol, right? What is it like?
It's 4.5.
4.5,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's great.
I've introduced many people to this beer, and at the first one, I'm like, "This is my favorite beer," so that probably skews them a little bit, or one of my favorite beers, and probably skews them a little bit. So the first one they're just like, "Yeah, this is fine," and then like when they get to the third one is when it's like, "This is the best beer I've ever had."
Right. You
It's
can,
to start
you can drink them
your
all night long.
Palate acclimates to it, and then it starts opening up with more of the citrus character, and like beers that do that, especially at lower alcohols, are ones that it's like that's, as someone who tries to make beer, or does make beer, I guess, that's like a wizard did that.
Yeah. I will say with this particular bottle, is anyone else getting a little bit of Lightstruck character from this bottle, or is that just me?
I was
with the
getting
hops?
sulfur, and
Sulfur,
like an
okay.
egg white kind of, sulfur, like a souffle sort of thing on the nose. That's blowing off a bit, but it's there. I kind of associate that with like a lager yeast, to have that kind of sulfur note.
Sure.
Right, which was certainly not the case here. But
Well, it could also be it's bottle conditioned, so it's a year into that. So
Right.
that yeast could be doing some funky things.
Yeah.
This far in.
It's interesting, a mentor of mine from a wine background said that the money's in the finish, right? When trying to identify the world's greatest products, that's pretty much an axiom across all kinds and types and categories. It's like the longer the finish, the better the product is, assuming it's a finish that's not super cloying and, obnoxious and horrific. But if it's pleasurable and it keeps on going and sort of entices you to like do the game you just did and wait to figure out how long it's going to last, I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. It's artistry, really.
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool. It's one of the greats. Really a beer to me that is without peer. There's
Yeah.
what else? If you wanted a Taras Bulba and you couldn't get it, what else would you get? Something else from Delacen, probably.
Something
like
else
a
from
Zinna
Delacen,
beer.
or a beer that I made because I couldn't get Taras Bulba for
Right.
about 2 years.
Okay.
You know, like,
Right.
like a lot of our beers are me being like, what would I make that wouldn't be as good as Taras Bulba? So,
But I'm surprised that this has not become like a Italian Pils type thing,
Yeah.
where like people went to Italy, had this Tipo Pils, freaked out, thought it was the best, went home and made Pivo. Pivo then I think blew people's minds.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying maybe they are also one of the creators of the style, only because I think they were, the reason
they
the
being
style
Firestone
exists,
Walker.
I think, for Pivo. Italian Pilsner exists because of Pivo, I would say, more than because of Tipo, oddly enough. Because
Yeah.
it's saying, like, yes, this beer you've never heard, I'd never heard of Tipo until Pivo, for
Right.
example.
Yeah.
So...
and there is something to like, it did take it a step. Like, I like
Yeah.
Pivo better than Tipo.
yeah.
I know I'm often
Sure.
in the minority when having that conversation, but give them, if they're, I
Yeah. But, I
I
mean,
like Pivo better.
yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I'm sure you're not the only one. It's a great beer. But what I was getting at is I'm surprised this beer, this beer has way more hype than Tipo does. Not
Sure.
Pivo, but Tipo.
Yeah.
And there's nobody making a beer that is coming out and saying, like, this beer is inspired by Delacen, and
Yeah.
this is what we're going for. It just isn't there, and I'm surprised.
Yeah, I don't think Belgian brewing has ever really taken off in American craft brewing like the brewers wanted it to, in the same especially in the same way that English brewing or English inspired American brewing or now lager brewing really has.
Yeah.
So there just probably isn't the consumer market that is aware of and yet unable to get Taras Bulba that would have been there for Pivo,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the familiarity or the I don't know or the ability to make it taste like this. There's a lot of weird tank geometries going on and a lot of weird fermentation profiles and fermentation curves supposedly happening with this that are very atypical for American beer production.
You just, from a sensory standpoint, a couple of things that I'm getting that I haven't heard are there's this real pepperiness to it as well, like a radish kind of thing. It's part of the lingering,
radish. Yeah,
I
good
love
part
call.
of the
Yeah.
lingering quality to it is this kind of peppery, tingly sort of heat. It's like capsaicin, like how that lingers on
Yeah,
the tongue.
yeah.
It's a really similar effect, and it's really remarkable that a light beer like this can have that amount of length. And I think that's part of it is that beyond astringency, there's another level of bitterness that this dives into.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It really does.
Yeah. I've never thought about it like that, but that is really accurate and really descriptive and nice.
Yeah.
You're good at this.
Cool. Yeah.
Ding.
Radish.
Earned a paycheck.
Radish. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
I totally get that though. Yeah. I can see where
Yeah.
that's headed. What a fun beer. What a cool beer. Now I'm looking forward to having it on draft again.
Yeah.
Or getting fresher bottles in.
I mean, these are tasting pretty good. To be
Yeah, they are
honest, so.
tasting pretty good, but I'm still gonna. As soon as we take another break, I'm pulling open Slack and gonna be giving some words to the people at the bottle shop. So, but anyway, should we move on, or go on to the next one? Why don't we? I do need to pick another beer, so can we take another quick break and
Sure.
then I'll grab another beer and then we can go through our second set.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right.
Brilliant.
All right.
And we're back. The Beer Temple Podcast. We're tasting beers here with your co-host, Chris Quinn, and Jerald, the Beverage Testing Institute, right? Not tasting,
right.
testing. I always flip them in my mind sometimes. It's tastings.com.
Is one of our websites, yeah. You're not alone.
And we're going through, we're tasting beers, we're talking about what we're actually smelling and seeing and feeling about these beers.
And what beer do you have there, Jerald?
So we just off mic, we were talking about how, winemaking experience can inform brewing experiences and how, brewers can learn a lot from winemakers. So I brought something from one of our trade missions to California. My colleague Andrew met with the winemaker for Screaming Eagle, which is a wine of note in the U.S. market here and in the world. And Nick, he actually makes a beer, several beers, and we're going to taste one of them. This is called Hanabi, and it's the Hana, which is their full-time production beer, their flagship beer. So his philosophy is, people have done explorations of hops, and there have been hop-forward beers. Yeah, of course. There have been hop-forward beers for last couple decades, and there have been malt-forward beers, but specifically, roasting in different types of, degrees of roasting. But there really has been an emphasis on grain-forward. So he's worked with partner farms, mostly in England, to identify heirloom varietals, including the original varietal that was in Pilsner Quell of barley. And so he has a farm in England producing that. And he's taking that barley and shipping it over here and making this beer. And he makes a range of different lager beers with different heirloom barleys.
Just immediately, this smells more like a bag of malt than any other beer I've ever had. Like
Wow.
it's remarkable. Like when you open a bag of malt to mill it, there's like a specific thing, and it's not just barley, it's malt. And like if you're at like a malted milkshake, like the malt powder and all like that like characteristic, it's like a sweet. It's malt. I don't like it's hard to put other words to it.
It's interesting. It says
I don't have
right
great
on
vocabulary.
the label, grain-forward lagers. Mm-hmm. So it's like just part
It's
of their lager. It's interesting.
That's the philosophy.
Yeah. Again, we've got a lager that isn't sparklingly clear, which just goes to show that these days that isn't a necessity.
Right.
To have one of those brilliantly clear.
We call
lagers.
this minutely hazy.
Yeah,
Minute.
I'd say that'd be a little hazy.
Yeah, just that overwhelmingly malt character, but not like sweetness, just the character of something that has a grain that's been malted. And then maybe a touch of noble hop and a little sulfur on it, maybe.
Man,
Oh yeah, wisp, definitely. But it's within like the pleasurable range of
Right,
sulfur.
right.
It's like eggs or frittata, this kind of thing.
I like that amount.
It took me like smelling it a bunch, putting it down, and then picking it back up because I wasn't getting that malt character that you're talking about. And then I picked it back up and was like, whoa, it is. It's like Whoppers without the chocolate.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It almost suggests vanilla. It's
Yeah.
kind of on the perimeter of that kind of.
Or like white chocolate. I get this
chocolate,
weird,
yeah.
like, I get this, like.
It's like, it's so obvious.
I haven't even
Like, there's,
tasted it
like,
yet.
Graham crackery.
I've yet to taste it. I'm just
like-
smelling it.
Yeah, it's kind of, I call it souffle, like a meringue or souffle, where you get that kind of sweetness from the egg part of the sulfur, but there's a sweetness behind it too. So it's in that meringue souffle kind of zone for me.
Very malt forward. Yeah, I'm going to Napa next month, and I took a photo because I will be visiting this place.
Great.
So.
Yeah, it's very malt forward, but it's not like sweet, but it's the flavor of malt. It's the flavor of malted barley.
But it almost has like a little bit of a kiss of like a lemony character at the very, very end for me. Like just and then it gets like almost like I want to say ashy, but like a powdery finish to it at the end.
I wonder if
Very
that's like
interesting
a
beer.
similarly mineral, like a little heavy on the heavier on the minerality than the other things we've been calling minerally.
Yeah, it
They're
is.
like kind of like not quite aspirin on the minerality, but like or Tylenol, but like
But chalk.
chalky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chalk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's very intentional in terms of, they're putting together the water
Yeah.
profile for this.
like
too.
chalk dust, like when you're clapping the chalk.
Yep.
People probably don't remember that. Well, people who listen to this show probably do. But,
Yeah.
But I like your it's almost like a lemon biscotti with like
Yeah.
almond. That's kind of, very savory but sweet, but citrusy sort of thing. It's not too sweet, not too dry.
interesting beer.
Yeah.
What an interesting beer for such a mild, subtle beer overall compared to some of the other flavors we've been having.
Yeah, I think there's something to. I mean, you're coming out of a place like Screaming Eagle, and you're kind of going to pay a little bit more attention to it. If this came out of like a 12-ounce can from Chicago, you'd be like, "Oh, this is really good." I don't think you would dig in, but it also did jump out of the glass. Is like this.
So it's in a big, chunky 500 ml
It's the same bottle we use.
Yeah, but it's big and heavy.
Yeah,
And
It's a little dear.
Presents a little bit. Yes,
It's a little dear, but it's part of this, new category of I call luxury crushers that I think is the pioneer of this category, where people are really innovating and creating, things that take a lot of money to produce. They're dealing with, heirloom grains and shipping from all over the world and really dialing this stuff in, so they're charging more. But you're getting something that's very, as you say, is very approachable and is more subtle than like kind of beating your head with like, here's this and here's that.
So Screaming Eagle, I know it, but I don't really know it. So to me, I think of that as like a expense account wine, like a steakhouse expense account wine. Nothing to say that it's not of its quality. Is this an expense account beer for those same restaurants? Is this like what that is made for? How much would this cost retail? Do you have any idea, Jerald?
It's $95 a six pack. So it's meant for a certain venue, right? And he's intentional about that. It's only going to be sold in certain places that really get what he's doing.
they sell these in 6-packs, not single bottles like this. Interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a 6-bottle case or something.
Yeah.
So $15 a bottle.
Wait,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So
the worst.
it's, it's very expensive.
Yeah,
it's very
really
expensive. I mean, how many of your beers are $15 a bottle?
We've released 2 beers that were $17 a bottle.
Right. So
Oh, some of them are.
some of them are, but
Yeah.
my point, not that you don't have any,
Yeah.
but this is also, 4.8% lager, I mean,
Sure.
it is unique. I'm just very curious, and I mean that like truly curious, like what is the time and place for this? And I think
it's
it's
on
at a
podcasts.
restaurant.
Oh.
No,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it's at a high-end restaurant. Like when I saw the bottle, then tasted it, I was like, this is made for the beer list at the high-end
At the
restaurant
Michelin-starred
where
restaurants.
yes,
At
where
the
they
French
can
Laundry,
Yes, yes, exactly.
And that's where it's being sold right now, those
Right.
kind of places. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he wants to make it approachable. I know I've talked to Andrew, who had a long meeting with him a couple months ago, or a month ago, and that the intent is really to kind of curate where it's being sold, but also with a future hope of introducing it to more people. It may be a more lower price point at some point.
I think that this highlights something that's currently it happens in beer where because it's a lager, we immediately think it shouldn't be valuable, that it should be a commodity. And if there's ever been a non-commodity lager,
yeah,
this is
yeah, for sure,
one of them.
for sure.
Just because, and the story enhances it, right? That they are focusing on these specific varietals of barley and malt, and really trying to pull that out.
And going back into history, like what did beers originally taste like? I mean, sort of like what Sam was doing
my
over
goodness,
at
yeah.
Dogfish Head in terms of like archaeology of beer.
Interesting. And it's great that, it's in the right hands, too, because it's with someone who can have a passion project
Right.
and push this thing forward and see if they can make a category for that.
Right.
People have been trying for a while, and this is as good an attempt as I can remember at going for that.
Right.
I think it's honestly, in a way, I think it's better than, Bourbon County Rare being in a super rare barrel or something like that.
Right.
Not that they're going for the French Laundry type thing, but
Right.
or even like Cantillon or stuff like that, where it's just like really hard and exclusive to get. I think there is, assuming like what you were saying, Jerald, that this is now he's really going for some of these heirloom grains. I could see why maybe it would cost that much.
And to like do something like this, get these heirloom grains, and then still decide to make a 4.8% lager with it, as like this is the peak expression of this,
Right.
and that's why it's important. Is not something that your typical brewery can do. You know,
Right.
you can't really
Yeah.
you can't tell that story while also pumping out your 4-packs of hazy IPAs. Like, not to deride hazy IPAs, but it's really tough to tell both of those stories effectively through the same channel.
And to have that focus. And I think that's also the structure thing that we're talking about, that it's particularly in this case, it's structured to showcase those grains. They don't want a beer that's going to mask what they're going to all this trouble to do, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. You're not going to take those grains and then, roast them to hell.
Right.
So they just taste like, chocolate.
Yeah.
You know.
And they provide the proper canvas for this sort of,
Yeah.
painting that he's trying to do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
Yeah, a
Thanks,
lot
Jim.
of beers get brought by, and that's one of the more interesting ones. So, all right,
comes with percussion,
Awesome. Well, I should go next. I think this is a great segue because I have a pumpkin beer.
What varietal of pumpkin did they?
Is that heirloom?
Yeah, all heirlooms. They don't say which one it is, so I'm not going to guess. My guess is probably the kind that comes in a can. This is from Stevens Point Brewing.
Yes.
Right?
Let's go.
I know where we're going.
Whole hog pumpkin ale.
It's just
I went by. This was a little bit on the fly, but I stand by it. I think this is the class leader in pumpkin beers, and I'm not a big pumpkin beer guy. I would not call myself a pumpkin beer guy, but I think this is
But you're the beer
as
that-
good, if not. It's as good as any I've ever had. I think it's definitely my favorite.
I think you are a pumpkin ale guy. The beer that changed your life was a pumpkin beer.
Oh, you're right. Maybe I am.
Pumpkin?
No,
pumpkin.
Pumpkin. Oh, yeah.
I don't
And
know
this
if
was
it changed.
$96 a 6-pack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
$96.99.
Yeah.
So,
question: Are
Yeah.
these still technically in season? Is this new stock, last year stock? Is this like
This
something
is-
year round now? Or?
no, this is leftover from Halloween and
Halloween
stuff like
time.
that. But this beer, I think, it holds up. I think just fine. I don't think it'll be too big a deal.
So like immediately very spiced on the nose.
Of course, yeah, yeah. So
Inviting and pleasing. I'm not saying that derisively. Trying to use big words today, I guess. But
I'm getting like almost like a hot apple cider
Yeah.
with cinnamon kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, it's like a
some clove
pumpkin
and
pie
everything,
with
yeah.
a la mode with the whipped cream and then a hot cider next to it.
Yeah.
To wash it down with.
yeah. And that's aromatically, that's basically all I get from this.
Yeah. And then you drink it. It has a little bit of that cinnamon in there. It's like a brown ale base. And it's drinkable. So what I like about this beer is that it's a beer that has a lot of pumpkin spice and a lot of pumpkin flavor to it. Sometimes I think they become too flavored where it might as well be something other than a beer.
Sure.
And I do like that it's got enough body that it remains a beer. And is pumpkin beer my favorite style? No. Is it my 10th favorite style? No.
It's third.
Yeah. Exactly.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why you have a year-round pumpkin beer handle here at the Beer Temple.
Exactly.
I like that the malt comes through, the stringency from, there's not a lot of hops, but that stringency comes through to sort of pepper up the spices a little bit.
Yeah, it's not aggressively sweet. Like it's
Right.
It's definitely got sweetness to it, but it's not over the top and it's not off-putting because of the sweetness, which I find
Yeah.
a lot of these pumpkin beers kind of go in that
Right.
direction.
And it has a texture that's beer, too, not like
Right.
that kind of syrupy,
Yeah.
fat, slick
Yeah.
thing.
Yes.
It's beer texture.
Yes. And I sometimes get pumpkin beers that are almost too mild. And I was like, well, if I'm going to have a pumpkin beer, I want it to be a pumpkin beer.
Right.
And I also do have a little bit of a soft spot for pumpkin beer because it's it's an actual American style.
Sure.
Going back to colonial days and then
Suck it, England.
reinvented in like the early 80s. So it was one of the first
Oh, you're saying like colonial, like they landed the Mayflower
Yeah.
and they started making pumpkin
beer.
Yeah.
They started making pumpkin beer way back in the day. And then the story of the modern pumpkin beer is the brewer at Buffalo Bills in California was, they were going through looking for all the old styles to brew, probably like Ken Grossman was doing at Sierra Nevada, and they're doing the pale ale
spice latte in
right.
the mash.
Well, they saw they're making they used to make these pumpkin beers, and he took
Bill Owens, yeah.
Exactly, and he took George Washington's recipe for a pumpkin beer and made it and tried to recreate it and realized that really pumpkin doesn't really add much pumpkin flavor at all. So then the next year he had this kind of like epiphany. It's like, well, what they want is what we associate with like pumpkin, which is these spices. So the next year he spiced it, and that is, you can still buy it, the original Buffalo Bill, pumpkin beer. And it's funny because like I will say that you have the pumpkin spice latte, pumpkin spice candles, everything like that it all comes down from this rebirth of the pumpkin beer. It wasn't the other way around. Like there was no pumpkin spice latte before the pumpkin beer. It was the first pumpkin spiced beverage that was around. And if someone can disprove me, I would love to hear it. I've yet to see any evidence of it, and I've looked.
That's awesome.
So I think that's kind of neat. So I have a soft spot for it. Do I think it's the most delicious? No. But of them, I think this is like maybe the only one we bring in. It's certainly 90% of what we bring in is this whole hog, because how many different ones do you need is kind of how we feel, and this is the best one.
Yeah,
in our minds.
Yeah, no one's coming in. Maybe pumpkin. People will be disappointed to know that, but like
difference. We also do.
Do you have
that's
a pumpkin
like the
beer?
other one.
And you point to that one. They're like, oh, there's a pumpkin on that label. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. And now people come to know that like that's the best one, and like we're the only place that gets it because we are the only people who are crazy enough to hound the distributor in April.
You keep saying that it's not your favorite style of beer, and you've described so much effort you've gone into to discern the best one and to make sure you have it. So
Hounding.
But you're assuming we don't do that with other stuff.
I think you put more effort into this than getting Headhunter. And that includes driving halfway across the country.
No, that's not true. I've definitely asked. I've tried to get Headhunter more than this, but yeah, so this was, I think, just in keeping with what do I think is like a exemplary version of a certain style. This is about as good a pumpkin beer as I've had. I think it's done about as well as it can be done. I like that it's beer. It's incredibly crowd pleasing, and it's like the only beer that I can like actually drink a 6-pack a year of, which is all I'm good for, really. Most of it happens on Thanksgiving. You know, most of the 6-pack is drank at Thanksgiving. Pumpkin beer on Thanksgiving, best time to have it, I will say.
The hot take of the century.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're
gonna come at you.
No, I mean, it's
I'm kidding.
like, think about it. I mean, all those food, it's really good.
No, I'm kidding. Of course, that's the best time to drink
All that
pumpkin
stuff,
beer.
yeah. Especially when you get the sweet potatoes rolling. It's just natural pairings.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing this has. It has a little squashy, especially the finish. It's got that kind of vegetal squashy, squash blossom kind of thing, which is cool. I mean, it's more to the beer part of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it has that gourd. Like, it actually has pumpkin. You can it's hard to make something taste like pumpkin. So this has it.
Yeah. And I will say, another reason I have a soft spot for this is because we were tasting it way back when we were in the other shop, and then it won like a BJCP medal, and I think it's medaled like multiple times, and it medaled one year when the distributor didn't bring it in and didn't tell us. They're just like, oh, we're not bringing it in this year, and then it won a gold medal at the Great American Beer Fest, and that stuff it's almost worth it to me to not have it for a year so I can send outraged emails and be like, this is what you didn't bring in. You guys are idiots. You have the rights. I want to buy it. Bring in the beer. Guess what? It came in the next year.
Nice.
It's been here every year since then. So
I also like it. It said it's a pumpkin ale brewed with pumpkin and spices. There's nothing on this that says natural flavors or anything like that. Which
what does that mean? Like
it means like
break
so.
that
When I was
down.
saying it's hard for something to taste like pumpkin, when it's hard to make something taste like peanuts or whatever it is, it usually just means someone adds extract. But you wouldn't be allowed to put brewed with pumpkin and spices and leave it at that on a label if you were using extracts.
Got it.
So they actually are using pumpkins and spices.
That's it. Yeah.
And maybe it's processed. I don't know what they're doing
Oh,
to
I'm
it.
sure
but,
it's
I don't think they're chunking
Nah.
up pumpkins and throwing
I don't
them
really
in
think
there,
there's reason to, frankly. Yeah.
No, but typically, cynical me would be like, "Oh, they bought some pumpkin extract or something," and then which exists.
Drop.
Yeah.
But according to this labeling, that they didn't. It's
Yeah.
like actual that squash blossom gourd flavor is coming from either some process of making the beer or the pumpkins themselves.
Well, that's cool. Well, hey, big up to Stevens Point.
Hey,
Yeah.
Neighbors to
Point
the
Brewing.
north. Top
Yeah.
yourself up.
There you go.
all right.
So, yeah, it's always fun to have, like, weird little styles like that. I almost brought in a Christmas beer, but I decided on the pumpkin beer instead.
It's tasty.
Yeah. Not bad, right?
Not bad at all.
Yeah. What do you got, Mike?
So typically, in both my beer purchases and my life in general, I tend to try to buy things from small producers that are local.
I see.
And this
One's coming
is
here.
the exact opposite of that. This one's Guinness.
Ah.
When we were talking about like top of class styles, or even like Chris and I have had conversations, and I have had conversations about just singular kind of styles, right? Where it really is only this one. Maybe there's another one or two
There's
places
not.
that make it.
There's
There's
not.
Murphy's, right?
Yeah, but Murphy's exists because of this.
Right. And so, like, it just, there's nothing better than it. It's just Guinness.
Have you said what it is? Okay, yeah. You said it. Guinness.
Yeah, it's the Irish Dry Stout, the Guinness.
Thank you.
I mean, literally a beer, a style that exists for a singular beer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost like, so I would say, if you're judging BJCP, doing judging, and especially if you get it on draft, on a true nitro, we're drinking out of a nitro can, but if you get it on an actual nitro draft, and you don't rate it as like perfect to style, it just shows that you need
You
to
don't know what you're talking
recalibrate.
about. Yeah.
Because it's like one of
You're
those
out.
things like a Czech Pilsner. That is Pilsner Urquell.
Right.
Right.
So, like, if you don't like Pilsner Urquell, like, that's not my favorite beer. But that does not mean it is not the standard for Czech Pilsner.
Right.
I mean, I just have to recalibrate then.
Right. And so the combination of being like top of class at its style, and then also just something that I personally really love, like, and everywhere you go, it's good, I still have a little pumpkin going on in my,
Yeah, right.
It's a good mashup.
but you get that great, like, almost, it's dark malt aromas.
Yeah.
Like dark red fruits, currants, cherries kind of vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
And
And
just
that
texturally,
malty,
it's
you get a
fantastic.
malty character from it too, but like you get the roast, but I do get
Mm-hmm.
that kind of malty character in the nose. It has, there's something about the smell of Guinness that is singular. I don't know what it is, but there's a smell to it.
Right.
That is, I think it's that maybe those roasted, unmalted.
Unmalted
Grain?
roasted barley, and they
Yeah.
roast all their own barley.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they roast all their own barley, or at least at the one in Ireland. I think they have other breweries, and I'm not sure if they're like
Right,
roasting
St.
it there
James Gate.
and sending it out. But
Right.
It's cool.
yeah, and it's a low ABV beer. It's crushable.
Or two.
The
Low calorie.
and then the texture of it and the nitrogenation of it to recreate people in pubs pulling from different casks to create like the best pour of Guinness is just, it's one of those, like, you watching when the History Channel was good and you watch like Modern Marvels. It's like how I feel about this, where it's like, how did they actually do this?
Right.
It's crazy.
And even like what sets this apart from, to me, from Beamish and Murphy's and really all the Americans too is the acidity in this beer. There's a hint of acidity that all of the others are lacking, which, you know, could very well be just a little bit of like lactic acid that they're dropping. I don't care what they're doing.
Right.
What it fascinates me, one, I think it makes the beer better. Two, I think it's fascinating that it's still this thread from the days of like giant porter vats where they would have these soured beers. Yeah. There's nothing. Talk about like Taras Bulba having no, like, this is like a modern version of like a time capsule. Like, what other beer is a throwback to old porter? Like, that's what this is. It's an old. It's a
crushable,
modernized version, and it's modern. I mean, this beer dates back to the '60s. You know, this is not a several hundred-year-old beer.
Right.
But its origins are from just a bygone era, and there's nobody else making it.
Right.
And it's so popular, and it's singular. Like, Murphy's and Beamish do not count. Like, it's nothing compared to, again, how is this beer in the day of domination of light lager, where, you know, in the days before craft beer started, it was all light lager dominating everything, and then you had Guinness, and now you have craft beer, and you still have and light lagers, and then Guinness, and neither of them touch what this is doing, because who can? It's crazy.
I think I might have made this analogy on the show before, but it's like with bourbon. It's really hard for small producers to make better bourbon than people that have been doing it forever, that have this insane stock of bourbon for the last, 50, 60 years of things they can blend, or single barrels. They have thousands and thousands of barrels, so they're going to have a single barrel that's better than one of your 30. It's a similar thing to me, where they just make so much of this. They roast all their own barley at St. James Gate for that. I guess this probably doesn't come from
roasted unmalted barley. This does come from St. James Gate.
It does?
Yeah. All the Guinness draft comes from St. James Gate.
Okay. Well, then they
in this country,
they roast all their own barley. I watched a video recently that was a tour of it, and they're talking about how it has to be. They get it to exactly the same temperature every time, or else they dump the batch of barley. Like, they just don't miss, I think. They don't have to worry about
somebody gets
batches.
Fired if that happens.
Right. They're doing so many things that you just can't do when you're not at scale like this, including, like, I'm sure they're blending massive amounts of beer. You know how they package this? They blend it into tankers, and the tankers drive from Dublin to Belfast. And then they blend it from tankers into even bigger tanks in Belfast and can it in Belfast.
It's crazy.
Like, I have no idea why, but like, it's a long drive for something like that. Like, it's not like it's like an hour and 45 minutes minimum. I think I Googled it when I was like, what are they doing? But they're just like, you can blend in ways that other places can't. It's amazing.
Very cool.
This isn't doing it, but really good fresh draft of it has this like finishing gear where like the freshness, and there's like a hop character that kicks in that this doesn't quite have, but like when you have a good like fresh like keg of it, it's even better.
But no, this is a beer that is best on draft.
And similar to Taras Bulba, like that old Taras Bulba was still drinking really well. And this doesn't have that gear, and I want that a little bit, but this is still pretty crushable.
Yeah.
What are you getting organoleptically? How do I say the word that I was...
Orgasmoleptically.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I'm thinking about my trip to Ireland and doing the tour and learning how to actually pour it. They give you like on part of the tour. You take the whole thing where you get a certificate and everything. You feel great because you poured a perfect Guinness, right? But I mean, just hearing you talk, I totally agree. The first thing that I thought of was like, wow, I forgot that there's diacetyl in here, but it's the perfect amount. So it's like
there definitely is a little diacetyl.
There's the perfect amount of these little flaws that create this beautiful masterpiece, right? So it's got the acetic that you were talking about that I think of as coffee acids, because I think this is very much like cappuccino, like a creamy cappuccino, gelato, or something like this. Yeah. That where you're going to get some acid from the coffee beans, right?
Yeah.
But that's a good thing in the context of this beer. And I'm thinking about, all that kind of coffee and that roasted malt stuff. And then I agree with you. The finish is different in the can versus the draft, because you're right. That extra gear for me is like the extra length that creaminess like provides that pillowy blanket that you can just coast on for a little while longer.
Yeah.
So it's very cool beer.
Yeah, and that in their ability to pinpoint, like, I'm sure they were making this beer for a much longer time, and it existed in many different ways. And to pinpoint, like, okay, we like it when it has like this little bit of diacetyl, this little bit of blended in acetic and lactic beer, like, and it tastes kind of like this. And then their ability to actually recreate it at scale is, and I would love to taste what those tasted like back in the day, but this is pretty delicious.
Never will. Yeah,
but like
it's not possible.
It's so. It's seemingly so against a lot of the principles of like brewing science, right? You'd be like, well, we should eliminate diacetyl, or like we should clean up that acetic or acidic character. But they're like, but that's what the people like. So now we need to figure out how to do it, and how to do it at scale, and how to do it repeatably. And
yeah, I think the
yeah,
fact
it's pretty amazing.
My wife doesn't like beer, and then we went to Ireland and we tried the Guinness, and she's like, I love this beer. So I think that's the staying power of it, is that it's so attractive to people that necessarily wouldn't drink a beer, wouldn't drink a hoppy beer or a light lager or anything like that. It's like, oh, it's soft, it's approachable, it's not too high in alcohol. I can drink it and not feel crazy. And, it checks off a lot of boxes for people who aren't necessarily beer drinkers, but then a ton of them for people who are beer drinkers. So it satisfies its huge range of an audience.
Yeah. It's a great beer.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for the pick.
Yeah. And one more thing
pleasure.
about the diacetyl that is interesting that I think Mike Siegel has, I think, said it on air, is he was at Guinness, and he was talking, I think, specifically about the foreign extra stout, and a brewer there said that they had, minimum diacetyl thresholds that they must meet because they felt that it was, I think, something like historically, true to what that beer is.
Right.
And that they not only accepted it, but required a certain amount of diacetyl in it.
You know what other brewery has that requirement?
Pilsner and Kel.
Yeah, I was at the tour, and I saw the levels, and they walked me through why, and they have this whole training kit why it's essential to hit these numbers, and it's totally intentional.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Well, just process-wise, and I know I said earlier that process is not the way that you get people into, or like IBUs or whatever, are not the way you get people into caring about things like beer, but you think about the reasons that diacetyl gets made and then doesn't get just like reuptake by yeast. It has a lot to do with your ability to control fermentation temperature, which is a pretty to control it up and down is a pretty modern like luxury. So when you're in the caves of Pilsner or Kel, they're there because they could keep them cool, but you can't just warm it up and have it reuptake that diacetyl the way that people making lager in cylindrical conical tanks that are jacketed with glycol can do now. Or you turn the jacket up to 55, and then like the yeast will try. It's like, no, the yeast is doing what it does because of the ambient temperature, not because you have some sort of chilling system. And that was the same for a lot of English beers, and I'm sure for Guinness when they started making these things, that it was not as easy to control temperatures going up and down. You had to choose, and so one of the byproducts was that you couldn't as easily get your yeast to want to reuptake diacetyl.
Interesting.
And so these beers became what they were partially because of the technology at the time, but then they became beloved for the way they tasted because of those things that we now call flaws because we can control for them.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, definitely if you go to England, it's not a flaw there. I can guarantee you that.
Right. And it's like, it's a fullness thing, right? There's like a savoriness. There's a different vantage point to drinking beer that we're not brought up with as like, not that our parents raised us to drink a certain way, but American beer just is different than that English beer.
Yeah. I remember the first, one of the first bars I went to in England, they had so many they had like 20 hand pulls. It was insane. And I got one, and it was, I mean, like unacceptable diacetyl levels, I think, to our palates. And we told the bartender, like, this
He
beer
laughed
is
at you.
and he was like,
That's me bestseller.
okay. He's like, oh, okay.
You're
okay.
American?
He's like, there's diacetyl in this beer. He's like, oh, okay. And then,
It's like, I know, right? Thumbs up.
and then we got a different beer, and that one beer sat on the bar the entire. He never bust it. It sat there the whole time and was on our tab. And I mean, this beer had so much diacetyl in it. It was insane. Not the most diacetyl ridden beer I'd had there, but up there. I had one where it was like truly that like rotten, rancid butter.
Yeah.
Oh, it was
spiked sample.
undrinkable. Undrinkable. I went into the bathroom and I poured it, which might be the only time I'd ever done that.
I think I'm much less sensitive to it than you are,
Not
too.
this one was like
that one I probably would have detected,
sickening.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
it was gross. Anyway, do we want to keep going, or we have some letters too that I think Jerald would.
Let's do one more, and then let's do a letter.
All right, one more.
Can we do
We'll
one
go
more?
quick.
Can we do one more for Valentine's Day?
Yeah.
Sure, let's do
Can
one
we
more for
do?
Valentine's Day.
So the winner of our last World Beer Championships was this beer, which is Fremont the Rusty Nail.
I already know it's going to be great because Fremont does not make bad beer.
And I figure
they
since
do
it's
not
Valentine's Day, this will provide a chocolate platform. But I also got chocolates for each and every one of you, my radio compadres. So please, let's do a little pairing as well as tasting, since we're going all out here. I don't know if this thing is actually going to work. It's like my little keychain opener. Is
we
like
need a-
not sufficient.
we
to
need a
open
wine.
This
Here, let me go see if I can.
wax-coated.
I'll go see if I
beast.
can find a wine key.
Yeah, they have them at the bar.
Wait, hold on.
You got it. You can get it.
I can get it. I'm a trained professional.
Exactly. Oh, I hear it. It's working.
Come on now.
Might just take a little while.
Oh yeah.
We got it.
Got it.
Whoa, make you work for your beer here.
Before
know.
we were on air, we were talking about Seattle. And the first time I went to Seattle, I was visiting a friend who had just moved out there. And it was probably almost 10 years ago now. And he lived in Fremont. And I was just walking around. I didn't know anything about the brewery.
And what is this beer? It's called the Rusty Nail,
It's the Rusty Nail, which has a Mexican spices, chocolate. What else? Is
oh,
in here?
a Mexican stout.
Yeah,
Oh, I love these.
Yeah. So, and it's absolutely delicious.
Smells great.
It's our best to show.
Yeah. So this was the winner of winners.
The winner of winners.
Wow.
And I mean, just look at the foam is
Yeah.
dark brown. I mean, this
Oh my
is
gosh.
intense.
So Imperial Oatmeal Stout
Yep.
brewed with licorice, with cinnamon bark added, aged in bourbon barrels.
Yeah, so the first time I went to Seattle, it was probably almost 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. I didn't know about the brewery. I just happened to wander in the weekend that they were releasing Dark Star, I think is like their big Russian Imperial Stout. And I had started doing the barrel aging program Cheers. Thank you for bringing this.
Of course.
I had started doing the barrel aging program at Pipeworks, and I think we might have won a FOBAB medal at that point. So I thought I knew a little thing or two, and I had that beer just being like, let's see what these idiots are doing. And I was like, oh, this is a lot better than the one I made. This is really good. And I was like, what is this? Like, how is this happening? And then I found out later it's like a former like Goose Island person, employee out there making just fantastic beers like all around. Bless you.
Allergic to it. Yeah.
Yeah, just making fantastic barrel aged beers, and like what they're doing with wet hop beers is also just insane. And
Yeah, their wet hop beer won previous year's contest too, over an IPA.
Jeez, that's
Pretty good chocolate pairing too, huh?
wow.
Great.
So
Wow. Very good with chocolate. Man, the caramel and the cinnamon and goes amazing.
Yeah, so
And I think the cool thing that they use, because American oak is known for two flavor byproducts in spirits, which are coconut and dill. And so this like tastes like coconut to me, but there's no coconut adjunct. It's just all the barrel, just doing that heavy lifting on that, which works with all the other adjuncts.
Oh yeah, chocolate and coconut.
Big
like a
cinnamon
chocolate
nose.
coconut. Yeah, cinnamon dessert.
Yeah,
but like a boozy adult dessert.
totally.
Really delicious.
Perfect for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
There's also some like dark fruits. Mm-hmm. Like some date and like a little pruny thing going on.
And I don't know if it's the power of suggestion from the label, but in the aroma, that kind of licorice, that like black licorice, is present as well, and really well put together. Not overly sweet. Mm-hmm. I mean, plenty of sweetness, but I mean enough booze and other stuff to kind of cut through it.
Mm-hmm.
Acidity.
Not cloying. Yeah.
Structure,
great.
acidity, so it holds together, doesn't get flabby.
I think that's part of a lot of modern, newer barrel-aged stouts are missing either bitterness or acidity.
Yeah.
There's at least not in balance with the sweetness. Try to be fuller and bigger and sweeter. They lose out on some of that thing that rounds out the flavor profile. And this is really doing it very well.
Yeah, a lot of like cherry in this too. Yeah, yeah, that the fruit really comes through.
I think, again, to talk about why that's happening. There's when dark malts oxidize in the right context, you can get that. It can become soy sauce, but it can also become cherries and prunes and really beautiful things like that.
And sour cherries, like choke cherries, like a real concentrated sour cherry.
Yeah. This is delicious. Thank you so much for
My
What a fun
pleasure.
beer. What a fun beer.
And, in the context of winter in Chicago, this is the time to drink these things, right?
Oh, yes.
So that's when I enjoy them.
For sure. All right, we ready for some letters then?
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely.
All right, we got a bunch. So I won't go through all of them, but I think in the next couple weeks we got to start doing some more letters, Mike, so we don't let them pile up. So I'll try to do a few. Here's well, I'll start out with this one. This was based on when we were talking about the chili beer. So this one came from
Hormel
Steve.
chili, not like the spicy chili beer.
Yes, the Hormel chili collab
Did
beer.
you guys get any of that to taste?
No, I missed that.
too-
train.
Oh, you missed out on
I
it.
missed it.
I'm shocked they didn't send you some.
Gosh darn it.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I said, remember? Oh, so anyway, so chili beer. So Steve writes, just a big thumbs up for the chili beer conversation. Equal parts disgust, amusement, pity, and I don't know what else, but laugh out loud, funny the whole way. So it's a very short, quick little email, and I wanted to read it. One, to thank Steve for sending it, but two, to mention that I think I said on the show that there's a good chance that I'm going to be tasting this beer. I think the next day, I got to try it.
Loved it.
Yeah, best beer I've ever had.
It's up there with all the
Why
pumpkin.
didn't you bring it?
Yeah,
there with all
right.
the
No, it wasn't mine.
there with all the pumpkin
Someone
beers
had
you've
a can, and it was. I saw somebody. I think Jake, Hot Take Jake, was saying that it was like just a disgusting abomination of a beer. I won't go.
I did say that.
I didn't go that far. It had somebody was saying it had like Fritos and Hormel or like a thing. They leaned into it because it tasted like Fritos. It tasted
like a lot
like
of
chili
corn.
cheese Fritos is what it tasted to me like.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was
Stomach's turning.
crazy. It wasn't disgusting. I finished my sample. Like I probably poured myself 4 ounces and drank the whole thing. And I'll tell you one thing, there's plenty of pastry stouts where I'm poured 1.5 ounces and I don't finish it. I take a little bit and I'm like, I get it. I'm cool. I drank the whole thing. I'm not going to be bringing in, I think I said if I liked it, I'd bring in a firkin of it. I agreed. So I won't be doing that. but it's,
Drat.
utter novelty executed as well as can be expected. It was also, it's like a light lager type deal. Like, so you wouldn't have expected that.
Oh, right.
Like a brown ale, maybe. No, light lager, golden, clearer than either of the lagers we had today.
The color of nacho cheese.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think it was more of a food beer, like you have to have it with a burger to really get it?
I think it's more of a complete novelty beer.
Okay.
I don't think it's meant really for anything other than I heard they sold 40 barrels of it in 4 days. So I think that's what it was meant to do.
They're building a base.
I didn't make any money.
So anyway, I wanted to say that. Thanks, Steve, for sending that letter, and I did get to try it. And there you go. We were mentioning it earlier, and I thought we might get to it, but I have a letter from it's not signed at all, but I'll just use so the deal is the way you sign your letter is how you will be addressed, because some people are in the industry, they don't want to say who they are necessarily. This guy is definitely in the industry, I can tell just from his email, but we'll just call him Dan. And Dan
Carey.
writes, yes. Well, you're not supposed to say that. But just remember, I've never had someone not sign the letter at all. Okay, he goes, hey guys, just saw this and thought it was relevant to Chris hyping up Sam Adams Boston Lager and the discussion around the reformulation of Fat Tire. And he's talking about how it's being reformulated.
Proves that we plan these shows out way ahead of time.
But here's the interesting. I think he brings up an interesting point. Dan does. He goes, with classic beers going away / being reformulated, will it become a trend in 2023? Hard to complain about it when we don't show up for them in the first place, but it could be a bummer if reference points go away for gateway beers, especially as we're starting to see less homogeneous beer options surface overall. I think that's very an interesting point to that. It's will we start to see like all these classic reformulations, and what does that mean if there's now like, oh, Sam Adams, that was like one of the start, and then someone has it, but it's not Sam Adams, it's not Fat Tire, like they're gone. It's like the Porters of past or something. I mean, in a much smaller way. But that I thought that was kind of, I never thought of it that way. If these beers that were
beers.
Once iconic, but they're not pulling any anymore.
Right.
And if they're changed, how does that affect the landscape for the uber geek who I think is who's listening to this show, or someone who's trying to educate themselves on the history and how stuff has come and gone, and does it really matter? I think it's another valid point, but. I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
I was listening to another beer podcast where Vinny Treluzzo was on talking about how they've consistently changed both Pliny and Blind Pig all the time. And
and Matt Brindleton mentioned that too.
Mm-hmm. I was listening to our podcast then. But and how those beers evolve subtly and slowly over time, but have also gotten lighter. And the hop profiles have changed, and the hop products they're using them have changed, but no one's really been like, it's not Blind Pig anymore. Pliny stinks now. Like, I wonder if the difference is that now they're like, well, people aren't buying it because it's not light. We got to reformulate. Talking about Fat Tire and not talking about Pliny, but like the sudden change and the pointing out that we're changing it is fundamentally different than the slow incremental change, because we're paying really close attention to what this beer is and how it's relating to people. Those are two very fundamentally different things. They're heading in similar directions with the color of the beers, obviously, but
I also think they're two I agree they're two fundamentally different things. I also think they're done for two fundamentally different reasons.
Yes.
I think I think
Maybe.
So here's what I think. I think that in the case of beers like Pliny, where it is slowly adjusting to it, it's kind of like reading tea leaves for what place does Pliny hold, and where does it need to be to continue to hold that place for people? And it needs to kind of be, kind of this thing, but it also needs to kind of shift and wiggle just slightly to kind of stay in a weird way the same in people's minds, because Vinny invented that like lupulin threshold shift and the idea that just our palates are changing all the time, which is, I think, true. Where with Sam Adams and Fat Tire, I don't think they're trying to do an adjustment to get it to back to where it was relative. That may be the case. I think they're trying to do a rebrand and get people to try it again and kind of goose sales. I think they're doing a distinctly different thing.
Well, Cynical Mike believes that, and most of Mike is Cynical Mike, but
I don't know the other one. I'll have to meet him one day.
I don't really. I'm not that cynical, but one is
You're just waxing poetic about Guinness. I know you're not that cynical.
One is an actual attention to the product, and as it being a living thing, and one is attention to capital P, the product, as the thing that happens to be the widget you're selling. Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Man, that's very cynical, because I bet you Jim Cook cares deeply about Boston Lager. I bet he really cares about it.
Yeah, but I bet Jim Cook doesn't wield the same ability to change that recipe that Vinny Treluzzo does.
I would argue, I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen sooner, because he wields that power. And he was like, that's the thing. That is mine. That's what built us. We're not changing it. Who knows? But, I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case.
I'll ask him.
Yeah, ask him.
I will.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't tell him I said that, though.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know. I didn't really have been tracking this, really.
It just came out. It just
Yeah,
came
it was a
out.
Super Bowl ad. It could have been one of those things that they were doing already, and then
Well, this email came in
let's
11
tell
days
everyone.
ago. It came in 11 days ago.
Okay, so before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but not that long ago. And it's a shame, because I had been talking, Jerald, about how I still think that beer is really exceptional, and it's opened my eyes a few times in the past, let's say, year, when I have it, and I'm like, man, this beer's good. And both times I had it, I got a second one after, and I was like, I want another one, because this is a good beer.
Yeah. It still may be good.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same, but it still might scratch that itch the same way.
Yeah. But I thought Dan brought up a very good point with, it could be a bummer. He says if reference points go away for these things. And I think that's a good way to put it. It would be a bummer.
Right. And there's just so much noise in craft beer now, too. There's so many beers made by so many breweries that for touchstones like that, where there's very few things that we can say, like almost a handful of the beers we've drank today, maybe the only one is Guinness that we could go out and be like, you can go get this no matter where you're listening to this. You can go grab it. Like things like Boston Lager and Fat Tire might not even be that, but like things that we can across the country can be like, you can go out and get this, and we can all drink the same liquid. Is a very rare, like small number for craft or craft adjacent things.
Totally. Yeah. And that's from my experience too. Like going to Michigan 20 years ago, like going to a grocery store, that was my craft choice. At the time, there was big chains that was starting to bring in things like Two Hearted and some local stuff, but really that was like the only thing in a wall of macros was Boston Lager. And that was my go-to. College, young adulthood, everything. It's just like I've been with that beer for a long time. So I'm sensitive to your thing about the shifting sands of these benchmarks. Like that's a big one for me.
It is.
We got to keep an eye on Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. They better
That's not
be
going to change.
Pardon my French, Serge. Fucking with that. They better not be.
I think it's still their number one or number two.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show what in a way, we have to do this show. We'll have to have Jerald on again. We'll have to do it all over again because we do need to talk about that beer. I mean, that beer is so exceptional and its longevity and stuff like that. So we'll talk about it and talk about why it might be the best American craft beer in the country. I mean, it's amazing. Obviously, American craft beer in the country. That's a little redundant. But anyway, we can talk about that next time. Whoops, I took off my glasses and realized I can't see. Anyway, hey, Dan.
Thanks,
great.
Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Great
Carey.
letter.
Dan Carey.
Write us back with what size shirt you have.
Also,
and you'll
don't-
get some merch. Maybe you'll get a Niz Was Knit hat if that's what you want. But,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I'm kidding. He only made like 5 of them. So. But
Gotta
yeah,
keep supply low.
let me know if you want a beer
also
temple
low.
thing or a Is Was thing, and we'll see if we can make that happen.
yeah. The rule of Saison economics: keep supply and demand low.
At all costs.
That's awesome. Let me
Saisononomics.
see. We've got another one. How much time? Where are we at, Serge? We got. Okay, we have. Okay. Well, there's a few that I'm gonna have to. So we talked about like with your old man about like having a second location and what do people think about it. We're gonna have to push that off till next week. I got a great response from a friend of the show, Chris Penna, about that. But it's just I wouldn't be doing it service if I didn't.
He's a very thoughtful man, so we have to put equal thought into the
I think that's only fair.
response to his email.
But I do have another one. So, one from another longtime friend of the show, Neil, writes, "Hi, Chris and Mike. For a long time, Hop Slam was basically the one interesting January beer release you could be excited for on an annual basis. Likely in response to the growth of dry January, Bell's moved Hop Slam to the late fall. On the one hand, the release lacked buzz in a crowded season. On the other hand, it doesn't seem to be collecting dust on the shelf. So I asked the insiders, did Bell's bold choice move the Hop Slam Slam release work? Let me say that sentence again. Did Bell's bold choice to move the Hop Slam release works? Thanks, guys. P.S. It tasted pretty darn good this year. Neil. It's funny, Neil. I was sitting talking with Jude, who has no last name, the other day, and he said he was talking about the exact
That was
same
while we were
thing.
recording the podcast last
Oh,
night.
did he say it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Well, he mentioned it again when I was sitting down with him because he was talking about, yeah. So, it's interesting. I mean, I do think that there was. It's curious why they would have done that. To me, it was always a Super Bowl beer, but
Right.
Sure.
but it's moving off shelves. I will say it did come and go. It could have also been in smaller quantities. Maybe they made a smaller batch this year. It could have been a million
they didn't.
things.
I think they did. It seemed
Yeah, I
like
think they made less. Because you used to see, like, for the past couple years, you would see huge stacks of it at grocery.
Exactly.
And I think maybe grocery got burned a little bit and didn't put in the big orders. And I think perhaps Bell's is smart enough to have known ahead of time. So my guess is those two things might be a little bit independent of one another, but that's just pure hot take. I mean, I have no actual idea. Yeah, it's funny because that beer is one that still like holds a place in people's hearts, especially in the Midwest. Like Hop Slam is a big deal, especially for Michiganders. And it's funny to think that even the time of release can annoy people. You know, I don't know of any other beer that I can think of. Like if Bourbon County came out a month earlier, would that take people off? Like that was my Black Friday thing.
I don't think people don't buy it in the same way. People buy Bourbon County for 4 days, and
Right.
then the rest of it sits on shelves for a while. Whereas Hop Slam, I feel like is more of a trickle of
Seasonal?
people just buying it, seeing oh Hop Slam's out, It's not like we're gonna go wait in line. We're gonna get all the variants. It's just like, oh, Hop Slam's out. All right, I'll get my Hop Slam.
Right.
And I think most people weren't as attuned to when it came out. They just knew it came out. And then when they saw it, they're like, oh yeah, I'll grab one of those.
Yeah.
I also think there's a lot of double IPAs around. And that used to be one of the only, it's like 10% alcohol, like with honey and continuously hopped or like heavily hopped things that now is more commonplace than when it used to be, when it was like the premier beer that they made. Like if it, not in volume, but in like, I don't know, hype and uniqueness.
I mean, when are they going to change the name to Slam Hearted? Now that everything is a brand extension for that brewery.
Heart Slam.
Right. We just got Hazy Hearted. We got tasted on Hazy Hearted today. So it looks like the marketing geniuses behind Voodoo Ranger have gotten their hands on Two Hearted with the acquisition. We were just thinking about it. Think of all there's Two Hearted, there's Light Hearted, there's Black Hearted, there's double Two Hearted,
which should have just been called Four
there's
Hearted.
Hazy Hearted.
Yeah.
There's, did I say Light Hearted already?
Yep, you did.
There's Cold Hearted, and there's Heavy Hearted. Those are the 7 I can think
double
of.
Two Hearted isn't Heavy Hearted.
It's different. It's a different beer.
What's Heavy Hearted?
I don't know. It's like a double IPA. I forget what it is.
So it's different than double.
It's different from double Two Hearted.
But it's a double.
So
IPA.
that's a spicy meatball. So
yeah, but it doesn't take away from Two Hearted being great.
I guess not. I mean,
for you, it does apparently.
I mean, it doesn't take away from the taste of Two Hearted is still great, but it does take away a little bit from Two Hearted. I mean, Bell's used to be like conspicuously kind of just not into that sort of stuff. Like even like hype styles, like they didn't do it. They didn't make a like a black IPA. They didn't make a hazy. They did with Official several years ago, but like for a while, for so long, they weren't doing it. They didn't do a what was it called? A session IPA when that was like all the rage. Like they didn't do one, and it was just interesting to see how quickly so many of these breweries have turned towards just being like, F it, we're gonna do it all. I mean, maybe that's just the market that we're in right now.
Marvelification of all things.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it is. I mean, maybe that's just what you have to do, or maybe that's what, the ad wizards are telling them that they have to do. I don't know.
When we talk about this, like this is going to be a thing that happens this year, but it's been happening, and it's smaller breweries for a very long time. I mean,
what has? What has been happening?
Brand extension, or the understanding that there's equity in certain words or brands or
Pipeworks was doing it long ago.
Long time ago. And I think they weren't they and we at the time weren't the only ones. So it's just makes sense. Like I don't begrudge them for doing it at all. Like I think there's probably more recognition of Two Hearted than there is for Bell's amongst most craft beer consumers.
I agree.
So like you can't begrudge them being like, well, more people know this thing than know Bell's. So if we want them, it's like getting mad at them for for putting Bell's on all their beers. Like if they're all IPAs and they're all those things, like it makes sense, and it's hard to begrudge it for me at least.
Sure. I mean, does the fact that there's now like 15 Star Wars movies and a dozen Star Wars TV shows degrade like the first 3 movies at all?
If you let it
maybe
for yourself,
I don't know. Right. I mean, it's a similar thing.
Depends on your focus.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
it can. I mean, it certainly can. Like if you are as diehard a fan of Two Hearted as you are of people are of Star Wars, and then you're
found like the Jay Wakefield of Two Hearted.
It's a little inside baseball. What's the Jar Jar Binks of the Two-Hearted universe? You know,
Exactly.
But does that ruin the original ones? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
I don't know.
Plus, they get all the
Yep.
fun pun permutations, you know.
Right.
They just
Pun.
go crazy with it.
Yeah.
I'm cold-hearted today. Now I'm lighthearted.
Right. We have a strict no pun policy in beer naming at ISWAs.
Okay.
Just to,
Yeah.
no puns.
I think in somebody's mind, it potentially does detract from it, whether the liquid tastes identical. I mean, think about it. If one of the, Bell's, one of the Hearted lineups, or all of them, were picked up like a celebrity endorsement from some like ridiculous celebrity or something like that.
Kid Rock.
Right. Kid Rock. Fine. Kid Rock.
Great choice.
Super Bowl ad, Kid Rock, and this and that. Like, would that detract from that beer for you? I bet you it probably would. Or something that you just like don't like, or like, ugh. More of like a, not like, oh, I hate that person, but more like, oh no. That I think I could see it detracting that you know. Like,
Yeah.
what if there was a beautiful illustrative label for Headhunter one day? What would I do? Like, where's my?
You would drink.
Where's-
You would still drink
I
Headhunter.
probably would.
Yeah, you would switch over to Benjamin Danklin.
Yeah, maybe I would. Or,
What if it was the Real Wives of Chicago?
right.
Fathead Brewery.
Oh, wow.
With Headhunter.
Look at that.
That's a great brand alignment.
Geez, I'm looking through it.
There's a lot of synergy.
I've never really looked at the label that closely. I mean,
It's not great.
he's got literally a bone through his nose
Yeah.
on the front of it.
Yeah.
Tribal.
Yeah.
Yes.
If that was not in suburban Ohio,
Interesting.
it probably would have been disallowed.
Yes.
Anyway.
Anyway, so I don't know. I guess it's just interesting to me that it does.
I mean,
But
yeah,
thanks,
and
Neil, for
brand
the email.
extension is almost necessarily brand dilution as well, right? So
Yeah. If anyone
almost
wants to
necessarily,
send
not
a letter,
necessarily.
it's been only a couple weeks since we've had a handwritten letter, but it's been a little while, so it's always appreciated when we get one of those. You can send them to the Beer Temple Podcast. You can send it to Surge. Anyway, I mean, it'll show up. It'll get into my hands.
Send a postcard.
People have.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten them from all over the world.
Take that Miller tour, send us the postcard.
Yeah. 3173 North Elston Avenue, Elston. That's Chicago, Illinois, 60618. And I have the address in the show notes. If you want to send an electronic version of a letter, you can do that too. Insiders at craftbeertemple.com. So thank you for everyone who's been sending letters, and we'll get to some of the others. Can't get to all of them, but there's some others that I definitely want to get to. So much appreciated. And thanks, much appreciated to all the beers that were brought today. And Jerald, thanks for bringing. I mean, you still have a couple, so I think we're gonna have to do this again sometime.
Yeah,
this was
this
a fun
was great.
To
episode.
be continued.
Yeah.
A very special episode.
Yeah.
Right, and this will get you in for another more than once a year.
I
We'll have
know.
to
I'm
do it
digging
again.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
awesome.
Love
hook.
it.
Good hook.
Is there anything you'd like to say in closing, Jerald?
No, just thanks. It's been great to reconnect, and I always feel like I learned so much from you guys. I just love listening to the conversation and the letters that come in. It's just great. So I promise I'll be back more often.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Absolute
Anything you would
pleasure.
like to say, Mike?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Well, then I think we can leave it till next week. So long, everyone.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.